What's good with y'all, man? Scotty knows back at it, talking hoops per usual. NBA, college basketball, you name it, whatever you want. Basketball related, I'm talking about it on this channel. So I hope you guys have enjoyed my content thus far. Trying to be as consistent as possible, but stick with me. It's trade season. It's trade season. It's time for teams to make moves. It's time for teams to decide what they want to do with their futures, whether it's going into next season or to try to become a contender this season, to try to make the playoffs this season. Whatever it is, it's time for teams to make certain moves and make certain trades to improve their squads. Uh, we have the Trey Young trade. The Trey Young trade is the kickoff to this trade, not to this Trey Young season, to this trade season. But yeah, Trey Young was just traded to the Washington Wizards for C.J. McCollum and Corey Kispert. No draft compensation involved, which was kind of surprising. I thought that there would be at least maybe a couple picks or like a pick or two for the Atlanta Hawks to try to bite on, to try to get something for the future, some legitimate future assets to build around, or to kind of get for Trey Young, a star point guard in this league. But not a bad trade for them. But I definitely like this trade for the Washington Wizards. But before we get into the Washington Wizards, before we get into the Atlanta Hawks, let's talk about Trey Young. So to begin, Trey Young. Let's look back to 2021. The 2021 season, they made the conference finals. They lost to the Milwaukee Bucks, I believe. Um, so that was kind of the peak years, or the peak of Trey Young as a franchise point guard, leading your team to being a contender, right? When you look at Trey Young's game, or before we get into Trey Young's game, even when you look at that season, I think Atlanta kind of got a bit cocky. They were kind of feeling themselves a little bit after that season, for sure. And they're like, oh, we could just run it back again. We could just do that again with the same squad. Didn't really make a lot of improvements to the roster. On that squad, they had John Collins, Clint Capella, DeAndre Hunter, Kevin Herter, Bodan Bogdanovic was still on the team. Uh, they had a decently deep roster. They had some pretty good, pretty solid talent that was capable of making the conference finals for the 2021 season, but they didn't really make a lot of roster improvements after that. So I think going to the season after, they kind of got tied up in. It was unfortunate that they couldn't replicate what they did in 2021. They just couldn't make the conference finals. They kind of went to the first round. I can't remember exactly how it broke down in the 2022 season, but they were not as good as a 2021 season, where they're pretty much labeled as contenders, making the conference finals, right? Almost making the NBA finals against a team that didn't have Giannis for a lot of that series. So eventually they decided to make some roster improvements, and they decided to trade for DeJounte Murray. They traded for DeJounte Murray in the 2022-2023 offseason. Me personally, when they made that trade, I was a little bit confused by it, just because I didn't see a vision necessarily for Trey Young and DeJounte being a dynamic duo. There's one thing to have two very good players, but you want it to be dynamic. You want them to complement each other, and you want things to kind of go hand in hand. Uh, they just didn't match well to me. I think when you look at a player like Trey Young and the way he plays, he's someone that needs the ball in his hands most of the time on the court. His usage is going to be high. His usage is going to be high. And then looking at DeJounte Murray, he wasn't this off-ball player that could really thrive off the ball necessarily. He's a good basketball player, but not really someone. He's not the co-star or the secondary option that you want to have behind Trey Young. Now you give props to the front office for trying or attempting to find some type of number two option for Trey, because DeJounte Murray and Kristaps Porzingis are probably the two best players that Trey Young has played with, and Jalen Johnson as well. I'll probably say Jalen Johnson is the best player that Trey Young has played with. But even now, when you see him play with Jalen Johnson, um, it's just a weird fit on the Hawks. So I think a big reason to why the Trey Young tenure on the Hawks didn't work how we all wanted it to is just because they didn't build a team early enough that was good enough to compete earlier on in his career. So now, cannot talk. Fast forwarding to this season, uh, Jalen Johnson is having an all-star caliber season by far. He's putting up 25, 30 points a game, triple doubles everywhere. One of the best assisting power forwards in the game, one of the best playmakers at the forward spots, at the forward position in the game. Um, and to be honest with you, I thought this team was going to be much, much better. I had this team being a top five seed in the East. I had them possibly even making a second round in the playoffs, like winning a playoff series, just because when you look at a starting lineup of Trae Young, Nikhil Alexander Walker, Zachary Risachet, number one pick, Jalen Johnson, all star caliber player, Chris Porzingis, another all star caliber player that just won a championship with the Boston Celtics and was a crucial player in that championship run. To me, that team was perfect for Trey Young, they did that team did a good job, or the construction of that team of this team, I thought helps Trey Young a lot with his deficiencies. When you look at the lack of size that he has, you have a 7'3" player in Kristaps Porzingis. You have great size with Jalen Johnson. You have you're playing next to a two guard or another wing in Nikhil Alexander Walker, who's more of a defensive connected dots type of wing or two guard, I guess. Zachary Risachet, who's like a 6'9", 6'10", Michael Porter Jr. type of player or mold of a player that could kind of shoot the ball, spot up. That's his archetype. He hasn't really been great. He hasn't really been that good, to be honest with you. But still, there's some intriguing. He's a number one pick, so you had to be pretty intrigued with what he could turn out to be, especially for this season. So to kind of see Trey Young not thrive with this team, a little bit disappointing. A big reason to why he hasn't worked with the Hawks as well is because of his durability. He just hasn't been on the court enough. That's honestly the biggest reason, especially this year. He just wasn't on the court enough. We couldn't see him and Porzingis and Jalen Johnson and Risachet and Nikhil Alexander Walker all on the court together, which could have been a really, really good team this season. And when you're not on the court, you can't really build any chemistry properly. So when you have Kristaps Porzingis and Trey Young always dealing with injuries, the team is going to have to rely on a Jalen Johnson, a Nikhil Alexander Walker, a Zachary Risachet, and others to pretty much be carried throughout the season. And that's why they're at the ninth seed halfway through the season, when they honestly should be a top six team at the very least. Just because when you look at the when you look at the depletion of the East, we look at a team like the Bucks, who are pretty much just being completely carried by Giannis Antetokounmpo. When you look at a team like the Boston Celtics, who have honestly exceeded expectations without Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown having an MVP caliber season. Uh, to me, the Hawks should have been in that top five or six seed. They should not be in the plan whatsoever, but they are, unfortunately. So that kind of stamped the end of Trae Young's tenure with the Hawks. When Trae Young came back from injury with the Hawks a couple weeks ago, it was obvious. Like defensively, they just looked worse just because he's a small player. He's not really that athletic. He doesn't have any positive defensive traits, to be honest with you. So it is what it is. Uh, but the positive thing is he got traded to the Washington Wizards, and now the Atlanta Hawks can start off with a clean slate. They can start off nice and clean. They can start off, or they could begin the rebuild, not a rebuild, but more of like a retooling of sorts. They could kind of, they're able to put Jalen Johnson in the driver's seat. They're able to put Jalen Johnson at that number one option type of player and kind of build the team around him and what he needs, which I think was always the route to go for the last year or so, especially with Trae Young's contract. His contract is just too big to deal with, especially with the type of production and the type of player that he is right now. So it's great to build a team around Jalen Johnson now that you could fully go behind 100% instead of trying to do this. We can still build around Trey Young type of thing when it's like that kind of has gone its course. And then for Trey Young, I love it. I love him going to the Wizards because he starts off clean as well. There's no expectations going to the Wizards. The Wizards are not a good team right now. They're in a rebuilding situation. I love the trade for the Wizards because when you get a star point guard for C.J. McCollum and Corey Kispert, I think that's a win. They don't have a point guard right now necessarily. They kind of they have a young core of Bilal Coulibaly. They have a young core of Bilal Coulibaly, Keyshawn George, Alex Sarr, and what's his name? Trey Johnson. Sharpshooter and Trey Johnson. So there's a nice little core kind of coming up over there in Washington. You just need the proper floor general and veteranship from a player like Trey Young to help with that. So as long as Trey Young doesn't stunt their growth, not that he would do it purposely, but as long as he doesn't stunt their growth, and as long as those players are continuing to develop for the next couple of years, and if Trey Young is just willing to wait it out a little bit and just be patient with the process, I think this team could be the ideal situation for Trey Young. I think he could find a team that could build around him properly. And if I'm a GM for the Washington Wizards, what's his name? Will Dawkins. Will Dawkins, I think, is the GM for the Washington Wizards. You just had to figure out ways to build a team around Trey Young, really, as your starting point guard, and try to do things differently than what the Hawks did. You had to really look at Trey Young's deficiencies, and you really had to look at the type of player that he is and understand, like, okay, knowing that we have Trey Young, what do we need to do to make sure that we can maximize what he gives us, while at the same time make sure that we win games. And if you could do that, you should be all set. So I love this trade for the Washington Wizards. I like this trade for the Hawks, even though they didn't get any draft compensation. And hey, Trey Young is still probably the second greatest Atlanta Hawk of all time. He did a lot of good. He did a lot of good for Atlanta as a city. He did a lot of good for the Atlanta Hawks as an organization. I think the years with Trey Young were the most entertaining years that I've seen from the Hawks. I'm a Knicks fan, so I don't really like Trey Young, even though I love his game. So Trey Young gave us a lot of memories with the Atlanta Hawks. So it's kind of unfortunate, or kind of sad. It's a little bit sad to see him go away from the Hawks now and move on to a different situation. But at the same time, I think it's really intriguing and real interesting to see him with the Washington Wizards now. And it's frankly exciting to see him with the Wizards. So I'm excited to see what he does with the Wizards for the next couple of years, assuming that the Wizards do choose to build around him or kind of have him as their lead point guard for the next couple of years and help the development of the young players. I really love this for the Washington Wizards. I like this for the Atlanta Hawks. And most importantly, I love this for Trey Young. I think with going to a team like the Washington Wizards, there's low expectations. Low expectations. With those low expectations, it will allow him to just be on the Wizards, kind of be a nice little veteran presence, or somewhat of a mentor, lead guard, veteran point guard, star point guard that has superstar qualities, and he could implement those things into the organization of the Washington Wizards. It gives the Washington Wizards an actual star player to look at. So when you look at the marketing and the overall brand of the Washington Wizards, that's going to go up. So I think for the city of Washington, that's great. I think for the franchise and in the Wizards, that's great as well. And then for the product for price of Trey Young, just getting him for CJ McCollum and Corey Kispert, no picks, nothing. You didn't have to give away Bilal Coulibaly. You didn't have to give away Keyshawn George. Definitely don't give away Alex Sarr, and definitely don't give away Trey Johnson. The future is looking pretty good for the Washington Wizards. It's just about doing it right. Just don't end up in the same boat that the Atlanta Hawks ended up with Trey Young, in terms of not being able to build around him properly. But as long as they build around him properly, and as long as they continue to develop their young core, they'll be looking pretty good in a couple years. But this is the Trey Young video. Went a little bit past 10 minutes again. I should probably turn this into like a 15-minute segment type of thing. I try to do this 10-minute talk with Scotty Knows type of thing, or just 10-minute basketball talk, but I don't know. I'll figure it out eventually. But this is the Trey Young video. It's trade season. I'm excited. Hopefully we get more trades like this one. Maybe with the John Morant. I don't know. But again, I'm Scotty Knows, talking hoops per usual, NBA, college basketball, whatever that's basketball related. I'm talking about it on this channel. Hope you guys enjoy my content. I hope you guys enjoy these videos so far, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.